The stories around us in No More Room in Hell aren't always obvious. Any good responder worth his merit knows that wandering eyes on anything but the objective will get you killed, and you have to stay focused while you're on the field. But the world around us is alive and active, and there's clues of what happened before us, before our mission, and before the objective. The map Powerplant holds traces of the story of the common man, a family man who did everything in his power to protect his family and his loved ones. But was it enough? Alright, let's start simply. So the name of the family is Kircher. There's several instances of Kircher's name appearing on title screens during the name. The farm itself is actually called Kircher Farm. If you're familiar with conventional naming tradition, the tradition is that normally the husbands, so thus under the same name, they would have the new family name of whoever the husband's family side was. And since we now have this information and that we are talking about the Kircher family, and Kircher is, I'm guessing, the husband or the primary person that established the farmhouse, I will be referring to the farmer now as Kircher for the rest of the video. What we can uncover about Kircher is quite interesting. Kircher seems to be a person that didn't have his eyes closed during the start of the outbreak. Kircher seems to be tracking information in his lower basement, information that a simple farmer shouldn't be aware of. Kircher seems to have been able to see through the lies of Hera during the initial outbreak, and knew that the issue was bigger than just a simple flu. The addition of this board brings forth many questions, and there are very little answers, but this has also got me theorizing. See, it makes me wonder the expertise of Kircher, and if he lived more than just a simple farm life. Think about it. This proposes the idea that either he had some form of inside information into Hera, CRC, or even NIDC. It also makes you question aspects of why he didn't evacuate if he had such knowledge. It makes you wonder what he knew about the evacuation attempts that other members of the public did not know. Why did he hunker down with this knowledge? Why, if he was so aware of the outbreak, did he remain where he was? Why did he hunker down instead of fleeing? I have several personal theories, other than him getting inside information. You see, I spoke on last video about how a CDC operative, or NIDC in this universe, was actively defamed and even slandered for their attempts into further researching the MPV virus. A personal theory of mine, from what I've uncovered at the farmhouse, is that this doctor that was later discredited by NIDC has been living at the farmhouse after retiring to live on the farmland. There is a high likelihood that the same doctor that NIDC let go and also defamed, who was worried about the virus spreading and furthering research into the MPV, is Kircher. Not only does this make sense as a virologist to see the patterns of a pandemic occurring from his own home and prepping, it is the logical explanation to the end of a NIDC researcher that NIDC did not want speaking out about the virus, or even bringing it up. What I'd say, however, is what is the biggest question here of all is what is Hera's connection to this? Hera has a direct connection to the CRC forces we play as. Hera has a direct connection to the NIDC that we collect the research of. But in this light, they are portrayed as heretics, as traitors to what their own purpose is supposed to be. So the question is, what did Kircher uncover that made him distrust Hera so much that he would choose to stay at his residence and hunker down and take his chances there versus doing an evacuation plan? Sam actively states over his CRC radio that the farmer was stubborn and maintained his position there. As an example of Kircher's knowledge, I will give you this simple example that I found on the map. Kircher's farm is one of the only standing settlements of survivor safe zones, still actively defended and still actively intact. Every single fence on his property has no flaws within the fences whatsoever. There is no forced entry other than an open gate, which personally, in my theory, could either be members of his family escaping or him himself escaping. My theory for why he left is because the zombies would not have simply opened the door and walked in. The door is obviously open, it is unlatched, and is left to swing open. He opened the door and left to go somewhere else. But the thing is, I don't think everyone in his family, or whoever he had in the farmhouse, got out scot-free, and I'll explain that in a sec. I would first like to set up a timeline for what happened. The blood is still warm when CRC arrives at the farmhouse. Not only is Sam mentioning it, that they had contact in the past with the farmer, there is also still actively burning fires on the property at the time of CRC interaction. Oh, so this isn't very organized, but I gotta get this in before I forget about it. But you're probably wondering what that Hydra on the actual thing is. There's some people saying that it is a biblical dragon, but I personally think that it is some form of symbol for the CRC. And here's why. CRC has that bare bones Cold War era system where it has no centralized command, right? All our agents are single-handed heads of the Hydra. If a CRC agent goes down in the field, more CRC agents are sent in. We see this in Pottsville with all the dead CRC agents. If you die on a CRC mission, they just send in more CRC operatives, because you are just expendable. You are survivors. A lot of you die. They don't lose material or resources very much, because they give you very little, and they send in a lot of you. So you will get the objective done at one point or another. Alright, back to the internal fall. The internal fall is pretty evident. When I said all the defenses on the farmhouse were intact, I mean all of them. There is not a single unbarred window in the farmhouse. All the infected we find are inside. So that means that somebody inside had to have been infected and started a mass infection from inside of the house. This also brings up a new question. Did Kircher make it out? I personally think he might not have made it out too, but he also could have got out, because there's not much information. This is literally all contextual, right? But anyways, here is my theories on how so many people got inside the farmhouse, because here's the thing. There are signs everywhere saying, don't come here, I'll shoot you. Don't come here, die somewhere else. Don't come here, there's nothing here for you, right? I personally think, right, that it's all for show. I think that Kircher, either from his years of being a doctor or from his family, got pressured into taking in refugees, and I will explain here shortly. So, the barn was turned into a makeshift shelter. There are beds there, and there are areas that are fortified to house people. But obviously, this probably was not good enough. The zombies probably came there first, attacked it, and then these refugees, now without shelter and being chased by a swarm, requested to get in to the farmer's house. The farmer has a kill on sight rule, has a do not mess with me rule. He offered them that barn for their own safety out of pity, because he needs to keep them at a distance. He knows that they are a biohazard. Letting them in could spell danger. But here's what's wrong. He has a moment of lapsed judgment. He lets them inside. They are injured. He begins to make a makeshift surgery room in the basement of his house, the most fortified location of his house. Right? And I don't know how it happened or where it happened. Most likely the basement. It started from the basement and got out. But at that point, from the basement, one of his patients turned and started biting people. And now remember this, folks, right? They aren't Walking Dead zombies. They aren't slow. When you start getting people in an enclosed space and they start biting each other, you ain't doing nothing to stop them. They will get you. So there's people trapped in a room with all the windows barred, all the doors locked. They are trapped inside of what was supposed to be their safe house. And everyone is getting bit and infected. Either Kircher escaped at this vital time with his family, or his family died, obviously, or he got trapped in there and everyone died. So maybe somewhere in there there's a zombified Kircher, but I don't know. All the farmer zombies look the same, so I don't know. Maybe he's in. The last bit of lore I can give is the local implications of what happened prior and during the outbreak at the farm. One of the key things of the farm is that there are plenty of dead cows. Most players will think that due to some of the cows being eaten, these cows were obviously killed by infected. This is not the case. If you observe the bodies and you see all the equipment lying around, vehicles, and IDC vans, you'll realize that these cows were killed with purpose. They were systematically killed, possibly believed to be a vector of the virus at the time. They also had equipment for collecting samples, and there are several biohazard containers around the map. NIDC researchers either uncovered that there was a foodborne element to the virus, aka animals, any sort of poultry, anything like that, were susceptible to being carriers of the virus, and thus through meat being able to infect survivors with the dormant strain, and then later that dormant strain would become active, or there was a alternative reasoning for this. They might have thought that MPV was some form of mad cow's disease, and thought that it might have been able to contract to humans. What is inside the biocontainment containers around the map are most likely either tissue samples, brain samples, spinal fluid samples, anything that NIDC would need to test this stuff out. But it seems like the infection hit too fast, though, and they were interrupted halfway through the process. But they were successful at killing all the cows. Alright, that's all that I could find on this POI thus far. Until we find any more information, I might have to update this later on. But for now, that's all I was able to find. If you want to follow the lore development of No More Room in Hell 2, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to keep a lookout for my videos on the subject. Next up will most likely be Field Hospital or another POI on the Powerplant map. Best of luck, responders.